I always wanted to kind of like really, start a company because I always kind of admired people from the technology side that, okay, hey, could we basically, like really build out engineering products which could basically improve the agility and I would say speed of development of the organizations to so that it could drive innovation at the much more faster levels to what it is today in the current world. Right?
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Lomitech, and sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and Birthright Excel. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today, I'm joined by Aayush Kumar, the CEO and founder of OpsLyft. Before OpsLyft, Aayush worked as a lead DevOps engineer at Indix. There, he was given the responsibility to handle the whole cloud infrastructure, which had a budget of upwards of $5 million. This rigorous exercise made him realize the fundamental problems with cloud cost optimization and how it is an ongoing exercise. When Aayush researched the market of cloud management platforms, he found out that even though there are a plethora of cloud solutions existing, most of them were just focused on providing analytics or were just using best practices to provide short-term solutions. This made him pivot from being a developer to an entrepreneur, and he started OpsLyft with the goal to help organizations manage their cloud operations the right way. In these 20 minutes, I'm excited to talk about you, about OpsLyft, about cloud management and spending. Where we're at today, cloud has taken over the world by storm. I feel that, there was a big hype around it. We sort of understood that it's happening, and now hype has been transitioning to a bunch of other new areas. But we're forgetting that most of the world is still not in cloud, and we're seeing companies transition to the cloud, especially a lot of the large organizations that previously were on-prem. And one of the big issues that you're talking about here is, spending and management. And, we need to be really smart and intentional about how we spend on cloud and how do we allocate and manage our resources. It's not trivial. And so thank you very much for being here, Aayush. And I'd love to, get started by even understanding, why are you in this space? So why cloud and why you?
Sure, absolutely. I think my journey has been pretty much, I would say, very organic in terms of where I am right now, right? In terms of building OpsLyft, and especially when you talk about being in cloud, etc. So this comes back to the fact wherein when I completed my undergrad in computer science in 2016, and post that I started working for a Seattle-based startup, which also had a presence in India, like in the city of Chennai, where I was hired as a first infrastructure and DevOps engineer into that company, right? And I think at that point in time, the company had just basically closed out its Series A, or I think it was Series B per se. And our focus was clearly from an organization standpoint that, okay, hey, how do we kind of really basically, scale our growth 3x in the next 12 to 18 months of time. And that kind of really translated to me as a infra engineer into the company that, okay, hey, our cloud footprint is also kind of gonna get matured and also grow in size, etc. So our spends are naturally going to get increased at that point in time, right? I think we were spending close to, around $5.5 million annually in AWS at that point in time. And that is a point in time, when our CEO really had this basically, a problem statement for me that, okay, hey, Aayush, this is something that is sort of becoming a black box for me, but still is a very hefty line item in the company's P&L for me at that point in time, right? And this seems like an engineering problem to be solved. So if you could do something about it, right? Because this is sort of like AWS, which is sort of coming under DevOps domain as well. So if you could basically solve this problem for us, so it is directly gonna reflect very heavily on our finance side of things altogether, right? So this kind of really became a very, natural progression towards deep diving into this particular problem statement. And I think I worked more and more into basically understanding this problem, not just, I would say, from AWS perspective, but also from a culture perspective in an organization, right? So I think that's where I think I had basically a lot of hands-on experience on this particular problem, moving back and forth, trying out different solutions, building a few products on my own, developing processes, etc., etc. And then I think once I was like finally able to kind of like really do justice to the problem statement into my own, I would say prior company where I used to work on, right? That is when I kind of like really started to kind of have the conversations with other folks in the industry across India and the US that, okay, hey, where's this basically a problem going in terms of other similar companies that basically like, like that were kind of that where I was kind of like really working on. And that is where I think, this problem was kind of like really evident at scale, wherein every growth stage company that I kind of like really used to speak with, everybody was kind of like really, hey, okay, hey, dude, we do experience basically this problem like really very frequently, and not just our leadership, but also the developers in the organization are also struggling with this particular problem, right? And then I kind of like really naturally found myself as a fit to solve this particular problem, given that at some point in time, I always wanted to kind of like really, start a company because I always kind of admired people from the technology side that, okay, hey, could we basically, like really build out engineering products which could basically improve the agility and I would say speed of development of the organizations to so that it could drive innovation at the much more faster levels to what it is today in the current world, right? So that was kind of like my thesis at the end of the day. Like from an entrepreneurship perspective, I saw companies like Datadog, Red Hat, Snowflake, etc., being built out of the US, and I really thought that, okay, hey, could I build a similar company out of India for the entire world, right? And that's where I think this problem and the entrepreneurial kind of like spirit kind of like really combined in together. And I think it was 2.5 years after my first job, I left the job and started to kind of like solve this problem for everyone around me. So yeah, that's how kind of the answer to the question, wherein why cloud, why me, and why OpsLyft in the very first place kind of like really exists. So yeah, that's the idea.
So if we're looking at the world today in terms of cloud management and spending, how do you describe the state that we're in? Where are we now?
Sure, absolutely. So I think at this point in time, if you talk about numbers, right? If you could see that AWS at this point in time is like really having more than, I would say, billions of dollars in basically revenue in terms of like from a quarter to quarter basis, right? So what does this translate basically to the companies, who are, I would say, more than 50% in today's date are born in cloud. And let's say the legacy enterprises in today's date who also have accepted the terms that we have to basically move in the cloud, given that it is more simpler and easier to operate at when it comes to basically developing elasticity of the infrastructure at scale, right? So when it comes to basically spending, right, I'm sure there is a very all this data is kind of like really available on the internet that more than 30% of the spending that companies are doing in today's state, right, is actually classified as a cloud waste at this point in time, right? And this waste essentially is not something, that people intentionally do, right? It's not like that someone wants to waste money upon the cloud, right? It's just that how the timing, or I would say the state of the industry at this point in time is looking like that everybody wants to like really innovate like really faster, right? Everybody wants to kind of like really build products like really faster, iterate upon them really faster. Companies want to reach out their product market fits as soon as possible. And once they reach out a product market fit, they want to kind of like really scale from there. And then if you, this is from the startup perspective, right? And then if you talk about basically the companies who are not on cloud at this point in time, right? They're primarily moving to the cloud with the intention of that, okay, hey, it would be simpler for us to kind of like really operate, that large, heavy infrastructure, which otherwise basically is a, set of bare metal servers hosted in a server farm, etc., etc. So everybody is kind of like, in one sentence, moving fast upon the cloud, right? That's what they essentially want to solve their business need when it comes to basically cloud adoption in general, right? Now, in the process of basically moving fast or building fast upon the cloud, right? What typically happens with the companies is that like the architecture of basically the applications that they deploy upon the cloud starts to becoming increasingly complex as and when they basically grow, right? And that is where I would say the complexity of the cloud like really comes into picture that, okay, hey, if our architecture is like really becoming complex, right? Then at the same point in time, our developers need to kind of like really understand that, okay, hey, what's the pricing model of each of the component kind of like really working on, right? What architectural efficient choices should we make so that we are getting all the performance that we need, we are innovating faster, and at the same point in time, we are incurring less cost as well, right? And this starts to basically oftentimes in today's startup ecosystem, if I talk about, often tends to get ignored out of the speed that people want to kind of like really get achieve, like want to solve for, right? That, okay, hey, we'll solve for cost after some point in time. We're paying maybe like what, 20, 50, like $100,000 a month. That's okay. We still have credits. We still basically are not burning a lot of money. It's still okay, right? And that is where the root of the problem kind of like really starts, right? That's, I would say, the source of the kind of entire problem at the end of the day, that people keep on building basically upon the faulty architectures, etc., etc. And then there comes a particular point in time, right, when the companies, like, I think at a massive scale, wherein people are spending like more than $5 million annually upon the cloud. It even goes to maybe $100 million to what Netflix actually spends. To what we see the data, they spend, I think, around $300 million annually upon the cloud, right? So that is when basically people realize that, okay, hey, all throughout our journey, right, we have not so much been, I would say, careful about that. We have to not just basically scale upon the cloud, but scale cost efficiently without compromising upon the performance as well, right? And now it is basically the kind of problem that is not less than a disease in a sort of a company, right? That you have to kind of like really not only solve for the technicality of it, that, okay, hey, just switch off these machines, etc., etc. But it's more of basically have become like a culture problem into the company, that any new environment, any new application that we have to deploy, just deploy. Don't worry about the cost. That's the kind of cultural aspect also that kind of you like really also get inside the companies, right? And then of course there is like bad architectural choices. There are like kind of I would say certain set of, I would say, applications that are being built in a certain way which can't be reversed back, and that is the resultant. At the end of the day, like people spending too much money upon the cloud and certain things that they can't go back to at the end of the day as well, right? So that's where people get paranoid about cloud spend at the end of the day in today's date, right? That it is not, I would say, just a problem that, okay, hey, you ignore it in the first and then you solve it for the later, because it's sort of, let's say, not P1 in the current days, like in the prior days, right? But as and when you scale up, right, this P1 problem sort of like this problem sort of becomes a P0, P1 into the company in such a way that people are, not really considering this as a technical problem, but all together like seeing this as a governance problem, as a basically engineering problem, and then as a culture problem that is very hard for companies to basically solve at scale at this point in time. And that is where I think, I would say today's state of cloud management, the cloud spend management specifically, a problem looks like from an industry standpoint, to what my understanding currently says. Yeah.
Wow. First of all, fascinating. And I love the way that you're describing sort of the situation which we've gotten to at this point, and a little bit about the progression of the market. There's a lot of players that are looking at the space and are saying, yeah, this is where we're at, and this is what's happening. And you still chose to create a startup in this crowded area. And so if you had to look now at sort of what is the holy grail of the offering of how to support companies as they're doing this resource management and cloud management, what are really the core solutions that people are looking for, that companies are looking for, that will actually move the needle with the P0s and P1s of their issues?
Sure, absolutely. First, so I'll break this, I would say, answer into two parts in the way. So I think the first part really revolves around that, okay, to the fact that what kind of companies do we work with, right? Where do we see the problem happening the most? I think that's the first, right? And then secondly, I think to answering your question, that what solutions typically these companies are like really looking for, right? So in our experience with basically speaking with the market, right, over the course of, I would say, last 1.5 years, right? So the legacy solutions that are being built into this particular market, right? As you mentioned, I think there are like a lot of players into this particular market. Some have been existent since, like, I would say, the last decade itself. Some are the new entrants into this market, like, and we are also a new entrant, right? So the legacy players into this market, I think, beautifully solve the problem for the enterprise segment of customers, right? I mean, if you take up like, let's say, an oil company for that matter, right? Or a big, I would say, enterprise with more than, I would say, 2 to 3,000 people basically working for them, etc., right? So there, the problem is more around solving for the process of cloud spend management, right? I think because there are like a lot of people. So I think it's more, as I mentioned, I think this is more of becoming a cultural problem than a like in addition to a technical problem, right? As in when you basically move larger into the kind of customers, scale of customers to rightly put in, right? It becomes a process problem at the end of the day. So that particular process problem is more or less, I would say, solved beautifully by the legacy companies that we see existent in today's market as well. And I think that's like a very much like solved problem when it comes to, I would say, large enterprise companies, right? But often what kind of like, if you look at the last 5 years, right? Especially, I think like to the Asian market, if I like talk about, right? And also I'll talk about the US market as well. But I think especially in the Asian market, right? The cloud adoption into the startup ecosystem has been kind of like really massive, right? I mean, to further narrow it down, I think if you see like companies basically from, I would say, Series A stage to, I would say, the pre-IPO stage, right? Every like company has been basically adopting AWS, Google, Microsoft, Azure, right? To the best of the capabilities being possible at in today's date, right? And now, like these companies are basically, the hypergrowth company, right? They want to just simply grow, right? Like to max. That is what typically you see the startup working on, right? That we have to grow at any cost, and right, growth at all costs, which unlikely is not the scenario in current market standpoint, right? To what we all know, to what basically at this point it is happening, right? But I'll not go depth into that. But I think apart from this, right, I think like growth is the more important driver for basically these companies, right? Whether in terms of number of users on their applications or for a B2B enterprise sort of company, like more number of customers, etc., right? So this is where the legacy, this is in this sort of customer segment, right? The legacy enterprise products actually do not do a lot of justice, because here you're not solving for the process. Here you are solving for quickness of the solutions, right? Because here the developers basically are working with the thesis that, okay, hey, 99% of my time is basically going into the application development, and which is catering to a business need, etc. And at the same point in time, I'm not able to basically dedicate that required amount of time which is able to do justice to, I would say, solving for cost efficiency, performance management, and security, etc., while delivering like the next day for the particular feature that the company needs to generate more revenue or like have more users, right? Here, the tables actually turn a lot, like for these enterprise products, right? Because here, like people don't need, okay, I don't want these basically fascinating dashboards, which like really says that, okay, your spending is like going this way. You might want to take a look into it, etc., right? Or here your projections for the next 3 months. I mean, come on, like our thing is kind of like really changing the next day, right? I can't really see that. I can't even want to think that what's going to happen to me in the next 3 months. You tell me, what do I do now, right? And that's where the thesis of the problem completely changes for these companies, right? And that's where we come in, right? And that's where I kind of like really decided to reinvent the, I would say, wheel in terms of solving the problem, right? So now with this problem thesis, right, with respect to cloud spend management, the solutions have to be designed in such a way, right, that, okay, hey, like a developer who is basically solving for cloud spend management issue in a particular company, right, is pressed with time and is pressed with context. These are two challenges basically, that a developer like really solves. So what you really need to give to the developer at the end of the day, right, if he happens to be the user of the product, right, that let's say there are like, like just simply let the developer know that, okay, hey, these are like 5 different, misconfigurations, or I would say 5 different bad things happening upon your cloud at this point in time in terms of cost. And here are basically 2 or 3 different things that you need to do basically on a click of a button, like really you like to need to fix it. And if you basically click this button or follow this process, your cost would be reduced. Here's a tracker for it. And at the end of the day, it would get reflected at the end of the day, like at the end of the month in your AWS bill, and which could like really be presented in a translated view to your finance teams as well, and in a presentable format to your engineering managers and to basically your leadership team as well. All this being done with minimal effort and time basically required from the developer at the end of the day, so that you could basically focus on, building your applications at that matter, right? And spend the least amount of time in basically solving for the cloud spend management issues, right? So that's how I would say the solutioning has to be into this particular market, right? So now, if I break down this solutioning, right, okay, what are the core solutions that basically people need? First is definitely people would need not analytics insights. It's the gone case in terms of when like you would give too much data to basically these developers that okay, hey guys, go ahead, understand these dashboards, figure out what these metrics means, what this data means, what this projection means, and once you've studied this data, built enough context, uh, go ahead and then develop some, like apply your brain, figure out get an insight out of it, and then figure out an action plan for it, right? Cut this entire step altogether. They do not have time to kind of do this, right? Simply get down to the business. Guys, tell me those five in plain English simple sentences, that these are five different, I would say, things happening in my EC2, in my S3, in basically this particular application deployed on Kubernetes cluster, etc. Here are the five things going wrong. What do I need to do? Fix it. If there's an automation available, I would click that automation. If automation is not being available, right? Suggest me a solution over there, right? If I need to talk to an expert, I could simply click on your platform when your expert is available on the call, right? Simply solve the issue right now, and then we are done, right? So that's basically, I think, one of this like core solution, that no analytics, only action items. I think that's first solution that we kind of like really deliver beautifully into a product. That's sort of being used by a lot of startups across India and the US, right? And then secondly, I think as and when you like move a little more, I would say higher into the kind of like ladder, right? In terms of the users, right? So at developers, this is the core, I would say, problem that you have to kind of like really solve or give the solution for. From a managerial perspective, right? To the technology manager's perspective, right? For these people, I think you really need to solve for that. Okay, hey, cloud spend management in like, I would say for them, has not been an experiential journey. That okay, how do they design a process in terms of governance around it, right? Given that there is so much dynamics around it, right? So for them, it's about like really solving for that. Okay, I don't want my own DevOps teams only to be pressed with solving for cloud spend management issues while they're solving for the infrastructure, I would say, growth as well, right? How can I basically create a great accountability on my development teams, so that they are able to kind of like take care of their cost in a more accountable way, such that they're like, it's like paying, like swiping their own credit card for their own applications, right? On paying for the cloud, right? So that accountability measure, right? Like giving them a capability to basically create budgets for different teams, tracking those budgets, and then basically also helping them to kind of like align in such a way that okay, hey, prioritize in terms of that. Okay, hey, if there are, let's say, these four opportunities here within these cloud budgets, okay, that's fine. Deal with them next month, right? You have to kind of give them that capability, right? And if you are going above the budget, okay, guys, you need to fix that first, right? And then basically, I think this, I would say, account management capabilities to the developers, so that basically they become responsible stewards for the cloud spend management, right? That is something that the technology leadership of the company is like really wanting to set up for when it comes to basically like having a process around cloud spend management for the developers, right? That's one. Like from a finance perspective, that's when the other like solution that like kind of like we offer with respect to the finance people. So like simply understand, these are not tech guys. The finance guys are not tech guys in the very first place, right? Like for them, it's like, okay, we spent $500,000 this month on AWS, right? If they have to dig down even further into this, right? No, they can't do it because they don't understand what EC2 is. They don't understand basically what what an S3 is at the end of the day, right? What they would like actually understand that okay, if you say that I spent like $500,000 on the cloud, right? And you say that okay, we are a B2B company. Can you simply tell me that okay, how much are we spending per customer, right? And if let's say from a customer perspective, right? If we are charging our customer basically, let's say on the base of 3-4 variables, maybe like say with regards to the data size that we kind of ingest with them, with regards to kind of, let's say, number of users that we kind of have on the platform for that one particular customer. So can you attribute basically the cloud cost with respect to the, I would say, charging drivers that we have for the customers? Because that would help me to kind of like really, do that cost analysis that, okay, hey, the money that I'm making from the customer versus the money that I'm spending with respect to the COGS, for that customer, is that kind of like rightly being balanced or not? Should I charge more to my customer? Should I charge less? It could sometimes even go benefit to the customer, but if it is not, I need to know, right? So developing, like solving for the value chain entire, from the developers to like getting done the cloud cost optimization work, to the, I would say, engineering management level people, to basically helping them prioritize and developing an efficient governance process which could develop accountability on developers, to finance people so that they could basically have a translated language spoken to basically the technology people in terms of cloud cost is the entire value chain that you need to like really solve in minutes to basically, for a high growth startup, like for a completeness of a spend management solution. So that's, I would say, the core solutions that I think particularly is required at this point in time.
I think it's fascinating, and I have about 10 more questions that I need to ask, but unfortunately I called this show 20-minute leaders, and so I think it's a really awesome take that you have here on some of the core. I think it was fascinating to hear, and I think that it's an amazing understanding about where we're at and what are really the core needs that organizations have, and I really love the sort of the mind shift that you've had from these dashboards and the business intelligence analytics viewpoint, transitioning to the actually actionable things that can take, and then the tracking and the way that it integrates to the rest of the company and organization, to their KPIs. I think that that's really, really cool. And Aayush, thank you very much for being here and for spending this time with me. I really enjoyed it. I wish you best of luck with OpsLyft, and thank you very much for the time.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. I'm really sorry. I took a little bit more time to explain to my answers. I think it's just the way when I talk about problems and answers, I think it's just the way I get lost into my thoughts. So
I think
really sorry if it took basically a lot of.
I think it's one of the best qualities in an entrepreneur. Is that you can see I could definitely see the passion coming through, and how excited you are about this problem, and how intentional you are about the way that you're thinking about it. So that served quite a bit of inspiration for me, and so no need to apologize. It was fantastic, and thank you very, very much, Aayush. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me, and it was definitely wonderful speaking with you. I look forward to speaking with you again for sure.